Is your betta fish getting sick or dying and you have no idea what to do? Keep watching as I share my first aid tips and tricks for giving your little buddy the best chances of recovery. Hi, my name is Irene with Girl Talks Fish, here with practical tips on nanofish and planted aquariums. And one of the most annoying things about fish keeping is dealing with disease. So I'm gonna break it down like an emergency room triage, where there are gonna be 4 categories. Things that cause immediate death, a quick death, a slow death, and random death. When I see immediate death in a fish, I usually suspect 2 things. One, they could have been very, very sick for quite a while. Like your fish is traveling from the fish farm to the wholesaler to the fish store and then finally you. And in that time, something could have been cooking and infecting and breeding for quite a while. And in that case, it may be pretty hard to save your fish. On the other hand, there could be something seriously wrong with the environment. So since I can't really control the former case, but I can take a look at the latter case, what I like to do is measure everything I can. So I usually keep on hand both test strips as well as a liquid test kit. And the test strips are really good at immediately telling me pH, KH, GH, as well as chlorine. I have definitely forgotten to add dechlorinator in the water before. As well as ammonia, nitrite, and nitrates, all water quality parameters that we need to take a look at and could really seriously affect our fish. If you just set up your aquarium and then immediately put your betta fish in it, it probably doesn't have the ecosystem of beneficial bacteria in it yet that will support your betta fish's waste load. So go ahead and look into adding some beneficial bacteria to kickstart the aquarium cycle, and then use that test kit to make sure you have 0 amounts of ammonia and nitrite, and then less than 40 ppm parts per million of nitrates. Some other environmental conditions to check would be all of the equipment to make sure they're working properly. So if you have a thermometer, is the temperature too low or too high? Sometimes those heaters have a tendency to either stick on or burn out. Same thing with the filter. If it's not on or working properly, you could have an oxygen issue going on in the aquarium, or it could be the flow is too high and your poor betta fish is being whipped around the tank. Also, does your aquarium have a lid or hood on the top? Because betta fish are known to jump. So in cases of immediate death, make sure you remove any dead fish you find and then carefully examine their bodies for any symptoms. You'll want to use that later to investigate the cause. And then go ahead and do a water change. Even if you just added a bunch of medications like the trio of quarantine medications, just because environmental conditions can often kill a fish much faster than any infection. And then finally, after you do the water change, go ahead and remeasure any water parameters that were way off the charts to make sure they're back in the safety zone. As for things that cause a quick death, some of the signs you may see is they all of a sudden stop eating and they're hiding all the time. Or maybe they're clearly lethargic and lying on the ground or swimming erratically. You may see gasping or rapid breathing, or maybe even dropsy, where all their scales are puffed out like a pine cone. In those cases, you want to take action immediately. It may be too late to save that particular fish, but we want to take any actions we can to save the rest of the fish in the aquarium. Bacterial infections in particular seem to strike really fast. Things like columnaris, which I've had and wiped out all my fish just like that. So if you suspect it's a bacterial infection, go ahead and treat it with an antibiotic like erythromycin and follow the instructions on the manufacturer's website. However, if it's another specific disease that you recognize, again, go ahead and seek out that particular medication and treat it with those instructions. In many cases, we don't know what the disease is. And so in that case, Aquarium Co-op has this trio of quarantine medications it recommends that kind of blasts all 3 bacterial, fungal, and parasitic infections. So the instructions are for every 10 gallons of water, you want to use 1 packet of Maricin, 1 packet of Periclins, and 1 teaspoon of ICX. Now, if even the quarantine medications don't work, or you live in an area where you're not able to purchase them, then it's time to try aquarium salt. Unfortunately, it is kind of harmful to aquarium plants, as well as certain invertebrates like snails. So ideally, you want to put them in a quarantine tank that doesn't have any of those things. And I'll put the link to the blog post that I wrote for Aquarium Co-op, but basically there's 3 levels of concentrations that you want to try. So start with the weakest one. If they don't improve, go to the next level, so on and so forth. And then in the end, there's instructions on how to remove the salt from your water. Things that can cause a slower death may include some cases of fin rot, you can see ick or other parasites that may cause like a wasting disease or swollen belly. So in those cases, go ahead and medicate them based on the symptoms you see, but ultimately we want to find out what the source of stress was that caused them to get sick, to have a weak immune system in the first place. Because if you don't find that source of stress and get rid of it, then they're gonna just keep getting sick over and over again. So some stressful things to remove include bad water quality. So the fix to that is do more regular partial water changes. You know, get that siphon to really suck out all the fish waste and excess debris or food at the bottom of the tank. Make sure to clean your filter as well. Your filter is not a magic black hole that just gets rid of gunk. It is actually more like a litter box where you need to clean out that litter box or else it's not gonna gather any more fish poop up. Make sure you have a filter in the first place. A lot of people, forget to get one. And then finally, don't overstock your aquarium or put too many fish, because the more fish are in there, the more fish waste gets produced, and then that water is just gonna foul up quicker than ever and get your fish sick. Other sources of stress for your betta fish could include a tank that is too small. So even if your betta is the only fish in there, it could be so small that just its poop itself is fouling up the water, versus a bigger tank has more water volume and it won't get dirty as quickly. Don't forget that bettas are tropical fish. They like warm temperatures, so you need to look at that thermometer, give it a heater, and make sure it's between 70 and 80 degrees Fahrenheit. Maybe the flow is too strong and your betta fish is just being whipped around and never gets a chance to rest. Remember, they have really long, flowy fins and tail in general, so you're either gonna have to do some DIY modifications and baffle that filter of yours, or replace it with a gentler filter like a sponge filter. Are there any sharp edges or decor that your betta's fins are getting caught on, causing it to rip and tear and have open wounds in the aquarium? As for tank mates, I have a whole video over here on proper betta fish tank mates, but in general, you don't want anything that's gonna nip its fins, bully it, or outcompete him for food. You also want to make sure that if you buy any new tank mates, you quarantine them first to make sure they don't carry any diseases to your betta fish. And then in cases where you don't have any tank mates, maybe your betta fish is just fighting his own reflection all the time, which I also have a video on, and that too could cause him too much stress. And then an issue I see in a lot of betta fish is overfeeding. I mean, it's hard to resist when they're constantly begging for food, but seriously, they're not actually that hungry. You want to aim for a slightly rounded, healthy belly. So a lot of people actually recommend fasting your betta fish 1 day a week just so they won't run into problems like constipation. You also want to feed your betta fish a wide variety of foods so that he gets all the vitamins and nutrients he needs. So don't rely on the same pellet all the time, day in and day out. Sometimes, no matter what you do, your betta fish just can't be saved, which is why I have this random deaths category. And for example, if you choose to breed your betta fish, just be aware that that will probably shorten his lifespan. Another reason may be just poor genetics. Sometimes your betta fish will just randomly get tumors or have internal organs that are failing and you just can't see it happening. Or if you're lucky enough, it could be just old age. Old bettas, they kind of get ratty fins, similar to how old dogs and cats get kind of ratty looking fur. They don't clean themselves as well anymore. You may have cataracts, or you'll see them lying down and taking a lot of naps during the day. So you may have noticed in the past few videos that Soundwave, my blue betta fish, has not been in this 20-gallon tank. He passed away recently. So I got him back in May 2017. And while he was with us, he lived in 4 different tanks, including my first ever planted tank. And then almost exactly 3 years later, in May 2020, I just noticed that he hadn't been moving in several days, and I couldn't remember the last time he'd eaten, so it was time. So I euthanized him using clove oil, and it was a touching moment. The whole family recorded a eulogies for him. But yeah, I have very fond memories of him. When I got him back in the day from Petco, he was supposed to be a butterfly betta with this beautiful white band on his tail, and that quickly went away. And I remember he was never good at making bubble nests, which is fine. I never bred him. And he was a great eater. I know some bettas are kind of picky, but he never was. But unfortunately, he also decided that his tail was extremely yummy, so we had to deal with tail biting issues. And in his retirement age, I went ahead and put him in the community tank, and he loved it because he was no longer on a diet. He could just gorge on the community food I fed everyone, so he was very fat and sassy at the end of his life. And I'm so grateful that he came to join us. So I didn't want to leave this video on a sad note, but just remember the wonderful memories I had with him and all the valuable lessons that he taught me over the years. And thank you so much for you guys supporting him while he was in my videos. So take time to enjoy your aquariums and spend that time with your fish, because you never know how long you have with them.